Hey guys, we're gonna jump right into it. I'm going to kind of walk you through making an electronics tray the way I do it. Not everybody's the same, but this is just the way I've kind of ironed out from here. So on the CX, I'll kind of show you some concerns, how to maybe plan everything out, some things you need to consider and keep in mind while you're making these. And yeah, we're just gonna jump right into it and hope you enjoy the video. Alright, so some things you need to consider for building an electronics tray are the components that you plan to put in said tray. Now you have to think kind of like, 10 steps ahead on this stuff. And the way I always do it is I always try to have all of the components that are going to go in the tray beforehand with me. And that way I can measure them, because your vertical height is the most critical dimension. Obviously you have, the footprint they take up, but your vertical height is going to determine, how much of this tray is going to hang down. And if you want really clean lines, you want it as thin as possible. And most of the time, I'm able to get away with maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch below the tube for all of my electronics, and it's just a really clean look. So you'll notice I've already welded in a crossbar here, and I did this out of square steel. That way it would be a simpler edge to weld to. And the way I'm going to do this tray is I'm going to make a single piece of sheet metal fit in here. It'll be bent up, and then I'll weld it along this seam. And my initial plan is to have a flat bottom here. And then, like I said, we have to plan out how deep it's going to extend down here. So all throughout here is going to be where the tray will reside. Now, here's some of the things I'm working with. I have an anti-gravity 8-cell battery. I've used these on a few CX500s before. I've always liked them. And then on this one, I'm doing something different. I'm actually putting a nice seat latch on it. Usually I just do these like a bolt-on, but I just happen to have this seat latch, which comes from a SV650 Suzuki that I had. And it's a very low profile design. And I think I'm going to try to make that work. Beyond that, what's going to go in the tray is this NUUT or nut, however you want to pronounce it, Morty system. And then also on the way is going to be a Rayson electronic ignition. So the Rayson uses an ignition controller box, which is 32 millimeter tall, which translates to right about 1.25 inches. So the socket is 1.5 inches in diameter, or I mean 1.25 inches in diameter, so that's why we're using it. So basically this is just going to make sure that I don't have anywhere that's less than 1.25 inches in height. So I'm going to start kind of holding things up to where they need to go and show you how I lay this out. Okay, let's see if I can get this on video and making this pretty clear. So most importantly, I have my battery. This is going to take up the most real estate, and this is going to get a little cowl in the back. So I'm going to shove this battery right back here, and that'll hang out no problem. And with these lithium ions, you can actually flip them and rotate them. I can mount it upside down if I wanted. Doesn't matter. All right. So picture this. I'm going to have the battery back here, and then this seat latch I'm going to need to put right about here on this flat, like where the tube comes flat. So right about here. So I should have room for both of those. And this is going to get a little complicated with the seat latch because I'm going to have the tray underneath, but then also I need to have a bar on top to keep this from coming upwards to actually hold it to the bike. So I'm probably going to have to trim this little tab off and make it flush, and that way if I want to remove it, I take out the bolts and I can slide it out like that. So that gives you an idea there. And then this being here, I have this entire section to put the electronic, like the brain box. And then I'm also going to have my ignition controller. And then possibly the starter solenoid. I might mount that, in a closer to the starter location, or a location closer to the starter. So yeah, this will end up getting routed just something along these lines. The key will be in the downward position, but that gives me just enough cable. I can mount that right about where I need it to, and it shouldn't be an issue. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I think the first order of business, though, is going to be to try to start mapping out the actual pan that's going to go in here. So the tubing used is 1 inch in diameter. So I'm gonna start mapping off of that. And you'll see my subframe, or so you can see it. My subframe is 7 inches to the center, center on center, and it's 6 inches wide because it's a 1 inch tube, obviously. So 6 inches on the inside. Now, one thing I want to do, I want to mark my centers on the bike, and that's going to save some time and save some headache in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark my centers, and that's going to be 8 inches outside to outside, so that's 4 in the center. And that's all we need right now. And then as we build brackets, to go further, then I can really mark the center here, because this is a little tricky. Anyway, we're going to get some arts and crafts going. Alright, so I did have a video of me actually making this and talking my way through it, explaining all the measurements and whatnot, but because I'm an idiot, I put the camera too close to my breaker box and lost all of my audio. So, here we are again. Now, I'll do a quick walkthrough of the critical dimensions. You saw me measure different areas on the bike, and so you kind of know what I'll be getting at here. But anyway, to make a template like this, what you do is you start with your center line. So this is just like some cardboard template paper. It's like a 97-cent sheet from Walmart. I just like it. It's thin. You can really work with it. So I usually use these. Doesn't really matter though. The important thing is you get your dimensions correct, and then you spend a lot of time on this before you transfer to metal, and it will just save you time in the long run. So, getting started, I cut out a section based off of my dimensions. So what I do is I mark my center line, and then we know that we have a 6 inch wide opening within the frame hoop itself, or the subframe. So obviously from the center we got 3 inches out on either side, and then we know that the height that we need is 1 1/4 inches. So each of my wings here is 1 1/4. Okay, and that gives me, I think it was like 8.5 inches total width. Because you got to think about the material you're going to use when you bend it up. So I think I left this at I cut it originally at like 18 inches. Yeah, 18 inches long, and it just happened to work out on my length. So you're going to be folding this section up here, and then where my square tubing is on the frame, I wanted to leave a little bit extra lip here, because this is this would end up getting bent up. Okay, so you always want to leave a little bit extra, and then just take your time, trim it down. And then beyond that, I marked this curve as a 3.5 inch center line radius, and I did 3.5 inch because it's 7 inches top to top, like at the middle of the tube. So half of that, 3.5 inches, and that's your radius to cut this at. And that's marked 3.5 inches just all the way down, so I have my middle point here. And then I actually left about, let me see, it was another 3.5 inches of flat area where the subframe comes down, and there's no, it's not changing direction. So like your bend is about right here. So I needed another flat area. So you notice I have a triangle cut here, or a relief cut, because this is the section that's going to get folded upwards, and you need to have that so you can pull it together, and it'll actually give you that bend. You can see, and that's just, you just kind of get used to, you know, making these, so you just cut it as you see fit. Start with a little and then just work your way up to it. So yeah, that's my template, and I just take a lot of time on them and get them exact, get them fitted correctly, and that way whenever I can just untape this, unfold it, transfer it to metal, get it as exact as I can lay that in the bike, and then you can see you know, all my bends are correct, and then it fits nicer and creates a nicer end product. So hopefully you understand this. Feel free to ask any questions you might have. Anything maybe I kind of breezed over. Like I said, this is just kind of redoing what I already went over, but since I lost the audio, it's something I had to do. So anyway, continuing on. Alright, so I've got this template laid in here. Get the idea of what it's going to look like. Obviously it's thin, it's paper, you're not going to see it, but hangs down about 1/4 inch from the bottom there. Now I've left extra material right here because I want to figure out the transition from this bend to this angle and then to the end of the tube. So anyway, what I think I'm going to do is keep this long. I'll do a cut right about here, and I'll fold that back up just like this. Whenever it's metal, we'll end up welding this seam, and then that'll be welded up top. And then from there, I'll probably try to leave a little extra material hanging in down here, and then this is going to get welded along the bottom, and it'll just be really clean. I've never really done any kind of bolt-in electronics tray. This is just how I do them. Once they're in there, they're in there. So I like to take my time and make these templates and mock everything up before I ever commit to doing stuff on metal. And then up front here, I do have a little gap just with how this thing laid in here, so I'll just remember to keep this a little long, and we'll trim it back as we need. And then obviously it's gonna have a 1/4 inch gap here. We'll end up doing a bend just upwards, and then welding on the bottom here. So yeah, that gets you a visual of where we're going. All right, so I've got the sides folded up, got a little transition in there. I'll keep a little extra material whenever I cut the metal, and you know, I'll just file it back. Whatever transition it's going to look like it's going to want it'll get. So anyway, see underneath, real clean. Just as an example for scale, the electrical boxes right there, and then battery. It should all fit. I think it's going to work out really well. So next up is I need to actually decide on the tail light, because I might actually flush in an LED, but I don't know. I'm not super set on that yet. I might actually build in an LED into like a fiberglass cowl here, which would look kind of cool, and it would give me something to try out because I've never used fiberglass before. So anyway, that's where we're at, and we'll come back as I start mapping out this template on the sheet metal. Alright, so I've got my template completed here, and I've got it transferred to some 16 gauge sheet metal. Now, a couple tips here. Mark out your center line, mark out any kind of bend lines, things like that, and always think to like leave a little bit of extra meat on the bone, so to speak. And then one thing I like to do here, because this is just marker, if you get any kind of brake clean on or any kind of chemical, acetone or whatever, your marker is just going to disappear. So I like to take a center punch, and you won't be able to see it, but I have a little dimple on my center lines and on my bend lines That way, if any of the marker gets washed away or wiped away somehow, you still have your marks. So that way you can always find center. I've already, like I've mentioned, I've already marked center on the bike. So like I've done the same thing here. I put a center mark and then a center punch. Very discreet. And that way you always have your marks. So I think that's just kind of a little quick tip for me. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing cut out, and then we'll start trying to bend it up, and I'll show you my process for that. Alright, so I'm about to start bending this plate up, and one adjustment I'm going to make real quick on this bend right here, where on the side it's going to go from flat to bent to up. I don't want this to be a hard bend line, as the tube that it's next to is kind of a gradual radius. So I think what I'm going to do, take my Dremel, just a little cutoff wheel, and do a relief cut from here to here, and then I'll try to roll this section so instead of being a sharp bend, it's like a curve, and I think that'll look a little bit cleaner. Still going to make it a little bit difficult with folding these pieces up, but we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a little difficult to bend this because I'm going to have to bend this section and this section, which is cut, together, and then bend this back down. But it won't be so bad. So I'll show you what I do. All right, let's get to bending. So the way I'm going to do this is use a combination of my vise with some aluminum soft jaws and a basic Harbor Freight metal brake that I modified and welded a plate to actually mount into my vise. So I think the bend we're going to do first is going to be our long bend here, and we'll bend this and this section together. We'll bend those up. We'll try not to get this one, but may not be possible. Then we'll do this one, and then I do need to put a line across here because we'll bend this up and then trim it back. Luckily this is 6 inches wide, which is the same as my vise, so even with these bent up we can still fit this in here and do what we need to do to it. And then in that moment I'll be using the soft jaws just so we don't like mar up the sheet metal. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this kind of rigged up here and we'll get started. Been a minute since I've used this. And I honestly would not recommend buying this. It is kind of a piece of crap. Now we're gonna go ahead and mark this, bend it up, and then we'll end up trimming it back a little bit more. We'll bend these back down, and then we'll work on doing this more curved type bend. Nice bend there. And the reason we bend that up is because this is going to hang a 1/4 inch below the tube. So we make up that 1/4 inch coming upward right here. And this will get cut right where that meets. And then we'll weld that. Alright. Okay. Now the hard one. Now it's too long in this dimension to fit it back down in the vise. So that's kind of pointless to try. So I'm probably gonna pull the vise out and then try to clamp something in right here onto the bench itself and then work it up. So once I get that figured out, I'll get back. Okay, so easy enough. I just used that 6-inch angle iron and just got it clamped at the first bend line here. So we're doing kind of a more gentle bend on this one. So give it a little bit there, and then I'm actually going to take this back apart, move this to the other side, and bend from that way to kind of equalize it out. Should be able to do that real quick. Bend it a little past, and then we can open it up when it's on the bike. Right now, I think we're ready for a test fit. I think that looks pretty good. It's not going to fit perfect because we're long on the front still. All right. Now we can only get in here so far on the front. Right now on the back, it's just tight. That's how we want it. We don't want it loose or anything. So if I bend this section in just a little bit more, that'll get it to sit flush upward, and then from there we can kind of hammer it back out to the tube, and then from there we'll weld it. So I'm gonna go ahead and try that. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the front, and I'll get it really fitting nice, and then I'll be back with you. It's bent all funky right now. What I have to do is actually weld right here on the back sides, get that ground down finished before I can actually permanently put it up in the bike, because I'm not going to be able to reach that once it's in there. So we're going to go ahead and tack the corners here, or weld up the corners here, start working on these. I'll test fit it a bunch more times. Get real close. I'm using the MIG on this one just because I don't trust myself in the TIG just yet. That would be my dog, Ben. He loves barking and everything. I'm actually wanting to spread this out just a little bit. I know the heat's going to bring it back together, so I just want to get some weight on here first. Much more solid already. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and grind this down, test fit it a few more times, and get back to welding. Super custom. Nah, just kidding. So I've got the tray set in here. I've got it kind of dialed in. So hangs down just about a 1/4 inch, and you seriously almost don't see it on that transition. There's a tiny little hair right there that you see, which, because I'm me, that drives me crazy, but that's the best I can get right now. So anyway, I've got it flat on the back. That's what I have this clamp on here for, with just a piece of steel, keeping it level, keeping it tight. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and tack this seam from the inside just a little ways up, about halfway, and then that'll kind of lock in the angle that it's bent at. And then I'll do the same on this side. I'll pull it back out, and then I will do the tacks again from the outside, grind it smooth, and then from there we'll stab this thing in and go ahead and finish weld it. I'll get it hammered over, so you'll see how I do I get rid of this gap and then I weld the top here, and it will look awesome. Almost done. I know this video's series is, or this video's taken forever. I don't know how long it's gonna end up being, but seriously, I don't think you guys want to spend 8-10 hours or more making something like this with me. So anyway, I'll try to cut it down as fast as I can, but you get the idea. Put a lot of time in these things. Anyway, continuing on.
Just say, Alexa, enable the 1057 the point skill. Once you've done that, order that submissive little minx to play everything alternative anytime. Just say, Alexa, play 1057 the point.
Okay, she is fitted. One piece, very clean, 1.25 inches deep. Oh yes. Now time to weld.